Welcome to the Marketing Behind Rapid Growth, the podcast where we explore the strategies, decisions, and growth engines behind some of the world's most successful technology companies. Today, we're talking about Mural. Picture a blank white rectangle on your screen. No lines, no prompts, no starting point, just empty space, waiting for you to do something brilliant with it. For most people, that's not freedom. That's paralysis. And that single uncomfortable truth sits at the center of one of the more interesting growth stories in enterprise software. A company that started by handing people infinite creative freedom, watched them freeze in front of it, and then built a multi-billion-dollar business by taking some of that freedom away. This is the story of Mural. Let's go back to 2011. Mariano Suarez Batan was a creative director at Disney, splitting his time between California and a game development team back in Buenos Aires. He had a simple, familiar problem. He needed to share early-stage ideas with people who weren't in the room. The default tool for that job was the slide deck, and Suarez Batan hated what a slide deck did to a conversation. Here's the thing about a polished presentation. It doesn't invite people in. It performs at them. A deck signals that the thinking is basically done, that a decision has already been made, and that the audience's job is to nod along or push back. It turns collaborators into judges. What he actually wanted was something closer to standing at a whiteboard with your team. Loose, unfinished, nobody performing, everybody building. That itch became Mural. Now here's where the story gets more interesting than founder has an idea becomes company. Because the real lesson in Mural's rise isn't really about whiteboards at all. It's about two separate, deliberate bets. One about product design, one about marketing infrastructure, and how those bets compounded into a business that hit a $2 billion valuation by 2021, crossed 9 figures in annual recurring revenue, and landed inside companies like IBM, Intuit, and Microsoft. Let's start with the product bet, because it's the more counterintuitive one. For decades, corporate software was built around what people in the industry call knowledge work. Storing information, processing it, organizing it, filing it where you can find it again. But something shifted. As automation ate the routine stuff, the valuable work moved somewhere else, into what Mural's team likes to call imagination work. Strategizing, designing, inventing things together in real time as a group. At the exact same moment, the workplace was scattering. Teams were going remote and global, and when that happens, you lose something that's easy to take for granted, a literal wall covered in sticky notes that a team could gather around and rearrange together. So there was a real opening here. Whoever could take the energy of an in-person workshop and translate it into software would be defining a brand new category. Not a productivity tool, a collaboration tool. Mural set out to be that company. And its first instinct was exactly what you'd expect. Give people an infinite canvas, digital sticky notes, some sketching tools, and get out of the way. That instinct was wrong, or at least incomplete. Because a blank canvas, it turns out, is intimidating. Without a facilitator physically nudging the room along, without the natural constraints of an actual meeting, people opened Mural, stared at the emptiness, and didn't know where to start. Total freedom is thrilling if you're a trained designer. For almost everyone else, it's a wall. And if Mural wanted to grow beyond the small population of people who already knew how to run a design workshop, freedom alone wasn't going to cut it. It had to actually teach people how to use the thing. The turning point came when Mural joined IDEO, the design firm that essentially popularized design thinking as a discipline, as a startup in residence in the mid-2000s. Working alongside people who ran these sessions professionally, the Mural team landed on an insight that would reshape everything downstream of it. People don't actually want a blank space. They want flexible structure, not a rigid template that boxes them in, not an empty void that leaves them stranded. Something in between. A frame loose enough to be creative inside of, but sturdy enough that you know where to put your first sticky note. That single insight turned Mural from a passive canvas into something closer to an active coach. The company built out a whole library of templates, customer journey maps, agile retrospectives, design sprints, plus tools built specifically for whoever was running the session. Built-in timers, a feature that snaps everyone's screen to the same spot. Even digital confetti, to mark the moment an idea clicks. And that residency at IDEO didn't just reshape the product, it also produced Mural's first marquee customer, IBM, which started using the tool to scale design thinking across its global teams. Now, there's a second layer to this product story that's easy to miss, and it might be the most strategically clever part of the whole thing. In a physical meeting room, the loudest person usually wins. Group voting exercises, the kind where everyone puts a dot sticker on their favorite idea, quietly reward whoever has the most status in the room, not necessarily the best idea. Mural built in private, anonymous voting. Suddenly, the quiet person's idea could win purely on merit, because nobody could see who voted for what until the results were in. That's not a minor feature. That's Mural rewriting the internal politics of a meeting. And it points to something Mural understood early about how enterprise software actually spreads inside a company. The average participant in a Mural session wasn't the real customer. The facilitator was the team lead running the workshop, the person whose job it is to make the room look organized and productive. Every feature that made that facilitator look prepared, in control, effective in front of their peers, turned that person into an evangelist. They'd run one great session with Mural, look good doing it, and then carry the tool to the next team and the next. That's not marketing spend. That's word of mouth, engineered directly into the product. So that's bet number one. Guide the user instead of just hosting them. Now let's talk about bet number two, because this is where the story shifts from product design to something a lot of growth teams will recognize immediately. For years, Mural's marketing was stuck. Not for lack of ideas, for lack of infrastructure. The marketing website was hard-coded and it was owned by engineering, which meant every new landing page, every repositioning effort, every campaign needed a developer. And developers, understandably, were mostly busy building the actual product, so marketing would file a ticket. And wait. Changes that should have taken minutes took days. Bigger projects took weeks, sometimes months. If you've ever worked in a marketing team that has to beg for engineering time, you already know exactly how this feels. You have the idea, you have the market opportunity, you just can't ship. Mural's answer was deceptively simple. Rebuild the entire marketing site on Webflow, a no-code platform, with help from an outside agency, and cut marketing loose from the product engineering queue entirely. Suddenly, the marketing and design teams could publish new pages, run experiments, and spin up landing pages tailored to specific accounts, all without writing a line of code. The results showed up fast. A 37% lift in revenue from self-serve visitors. The visitor-to-trial conversion rate more than doubled. Sit with that for a second. Not a new feature, not a new customer segment, just the ability to move at the speed of an idea instead of the speed of an engineering backlog. That alone reshaped the revenue numbers. The lesson underneath that is blunt, and it applies well past Mural. The best campaign in the world is worthless if your team can't actually ship it. Once marketing had its own engine, Mural leaned hard into data-driven demand generation and account-based marketing. And this mattered for a specific structural reason. Visual collaboration software is a hard sell from the top down. Nobody in the C-suite wakes up demanding a digital whiteboard. It spreads bottom up. One team adopts it, likes it, and it expands from there. Capturing that kind of organic, team-by-team growth requires marketing, sales, and product to be looking at the same customer data. Not three departments with three different stories about who the buyer is. More recently, as Mural has pushed further into AI, it's used that technology to mine sales calls and support transcripts, digging for the objections and pain points that buyers mention on a call but rarely say directly in a survey. Those insights get turned into targeted campaigns, faster than a traditional research cycle would ever allow. The company underlined how seriously it's taking this shift by bringing on Christina Bottas as Chief Marketing Officer, in late 2024, specifically to run the AI-focused marketing effort. Now, here's where the product bet and the marketing bet collide in the most dramatic way possible. In 2020, the pandemic sent the entire working world home overnight, and Mural was sitting right at the intersection of what companies suddenly, desperately needed. But it's worth being precise about this because it's tempting to just call it luck. It wasn't luck. Mural already had a product built specifically for distributed structured collaboration, and it already had a marketing engine that could move fast enough to capture a sudden spike in demand instead of watching it pass by while a developer worked through a ticket queue. The financing tells the story on its own. A $118 million Series B in August of 2020. then a $50 million Series C less than a year later in July of 2021, pushing the company's valuation past $2 billion. The pandemic created the moment, but it was years of prior discipline on the product side and the marketing side that let Mural actually seize it. So what should operators actually take from all of this? First, flexibility has a cost. Founders love to talk about open-ended products as a feature, but for most users, a blank slate isn't liberating. It raises the price of just getting started. Templates and proven frameworks lower that price, shorten time to value, and quietly reduce churn before it ever happens. Second, marketing speed is a growth lever in its own right, not a support function, a lever. A marketing team that has to borrow engineering time for every launch will always be a step behind the market. Give that team ownership of its own surface area, and you can move real conversion numbers without touching the product at all. Third, find the person who looks good when your software works, and build for them. Mural's facilitators weren't just users. They became a distribution channel because the product made them look competent in front of their own peers. And fourth, go-to-market silos are a quiet killer. When product sales and marketing are working from different pictures of the customer, you lose both speed and personalization at the same time. Mural's use of AI to turn raw customer conversations into marketing language is really just an attempt to keep everyone reading from the same page. So, to close the loop. Mural's story starts with a creative director's frustration with slide decks and ends with an enterprise platform valued in the billions, running inside some of the largest companies in the world. The takeaway isn't that Mural built a great product. Plenty of companies build great products and stall out anyway. The takeaway is that a great product was necessary, but never sufficient on its own. What actually turned a clever digital whiteboard into infrastructure for how companies think together was the decision to guide people instead of just handing them space, paired with a marketing function that was rebuilt to move fast and stay aligned with the rest of the business. The art was imagination work. The engine underneath it was disciplined execution. Mural bet that you need both. And for more than a decade now, that bet has held. This was the marketing behind rapid growth. See you in the next episode.